A pro wrestling video on Bucket List Reviews? You better believe it, brother. Hello everyone, welcome to the Bucket List Reviews. My name is Gibran and this is the 50th video of Bucket List Reviews. Yay! So, in order to commemorate this not really a moment of any major significance, I wanted to combine two of my life's passions, film and pro wrestling. Yes, ever since I was a kid, pro wrestling has always fascinated me. I was the little Hulkster during the late 80s and later on appreciated the likes of Macho Man, Ric Flair, Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, Sting, Undertaker, Razor Ramon, Chris Jericho, Kurt Angle, Benoit, and many more. But yet, for so many years, I could never explain what exactly was about pro wrestling that intrigued me. The fans and professionals of the company argue the fact that pro wrestling is beyond just mindless bashing of one's head in the squared circle. In fact, there's a lot of skill and artistry involved behind the scenes. So here I am to explore this question: is pro wrestling a visual form of
fake? Wrestling's fake.
Yeah, nice to see you here, Mr. UFC fan. Okay, so let's dive right into the subject matter, shall we? In the world of pro wrestling, there are certain terminologies that are often used within the industry to identify certain aspects of pro wrestling. One of those terminologies is the term kayfabe. Kayfabe is a term that is often used to define the world that pro wrestling centers around. It is the make all, break all world that every pro wrestler is supposed to live in. The storylines, over-the-top characters, and the integration of real-life events for added measure. Pro wrestling is all about involving the viewer in the scripted world of wrestling without ever admitting to the work behind the scenes. But of course, it wasn't always like this. In the early 20th century, pro wrestling was considered as actual sport within the ranks of baseball or football. As the decades went by, pro wrestling started to evolve into an unknown territory where it was hard to understand where exactly it could fit in. Is it a sport for its wrestling? Or a form of entertainment like theater or film for its storylines? In the mid-80s is the time where pro wrestling started to move away from sport and more towards entertainment. You see, the occasional genius Vince McMahon Jr. had a vision of targeting a global mass audience with larger-than-life characters and more involving storylines. This vision would later be referred to by the company as sports entertainment.
See, it's all fake and gay. Told ya, UFC is the real deal.
Well, not exactly. Wrestling was and still an integral part of the show. Okay, so this is how it all works. Just like any other film studio or theater group, the company consists of bookers who either play the role of recruiting talent or are a major component in the writing department. The group of in-house writers plan out storylines months in advance or weekly, depends on the era of wrestling. Promos or interviews are shot prior to an upcoming match in order to heighten the tension. The moves and momentum of matches are rehearsed. And finally, the big moment where the two wrestlers finally face one another, the ultimate showdown. Even with all the facade of so-called male soap opera, all of this is leading up to a wrestling match. The major factor is that almost every move and finisher is predetermined, which is one of the main reasons why pro wrestling could be considered as visual art and less of a sport. If you consider any other visual medium of art like theater, painting, sculpture, or the granddaddy of them all, film, they're all in one form or the other entail the capacity of a story, characters, plot, and even entertainment. When you enter the world of pro wrestling as a wrestler, there are certain key factors that you need to be a part of, which includes selling yourself or being over with the core audience. You need to have a catchy name like the Ultimate Warrior, or Ravishing Rick Rude, or Ricky Steamboat, something that will remain memorable for years to come. Also, you need to come up with a certain gimmick to go with your name. It could either be as lazy as whatever background you come from, or something completely fictional and cinematic. You need to be a part of a storyline. This could either mean that the writing staff will create a new storyline for you, depending on your existing popularity, or they will make room for you in an existing one. Promos are necessary for the world of wrestling because you need to heighten up your character for an upcoming pay-per-view. If you suck at promos, there's a high chance you will crash and burn quicker than the Hindenburg. Unless the company is forcing a wrestler down the fan's throat, of course. And finally, the wrestling match itself, where the actual fight takes a backseat to a choreographed masterwork on the canvas. But here's the major argument. Why something like UFC is part of mixed martial arts and pro wrestling is generally considered as fake or unworthy of being taken seriously?
Cause UFC is fucking real, bro. Wrestling is fake as shit.
Well, sure, the in-ring UFC fights are legit and not scripted like pro wrestling, but apart from that, it still follows most of the influences the pro wrestling consists of to heighten the tension for the audience to go and watch a match in the arena. I guess there are two key elements that make the critics look down upon pro wrestling. Firstly, the kayfabe world of wrestling has been protected by the industry for so long now that the eventual accusation of being fake is much more prominent than, let's say, theater or film, since they never hid the fact that it's all a work. This could be a transitional period where in the age of internet, the secrets of wrestling can never be safe, so might as well embrace kayfabe by the occasional winking back at the audience. And secondly, pro wrestling has always been targeted to the lowest denominator of the audience, from obvious stereotypes of foreign nationalities to blatantly insulting storylines involving real-life events. The wrestling industry has exploited it all just for the sake of TV ratings. And honestly, if someone showed me this on TV,
"You son of a bitch, I said you were gonna kiss my ass, that's what you're gonna do, whether you like it or not,"
I would never ever want to be a wrestling fan. In fact, I would look down upon it like many other critics. But then again, one needs to understand that behind all this facade lies real actual wrestling. You need incredible talent to pull off an exciting match, one that people will still talk about years to come.
UFC fighters can kick a wrestler's ass any day.
Actually not true. Many UFC fighters who have transitioned between MMA and pro wrestling have admitted the fact that pro wrestling has proven to be much more strenuous. But comparing MMA to pro wrestling is like comparing apples to oranges. Although UFC and pro wrestling share a lot of similarities when it comes to promotional stuff, the in-ring styles are almost completely different from one another. There was a period in my life where I got more involved in other forms of art like film and dismissed pro wrestling altogether. But then looking back at my childhood affair with wrestling, I began to appreciate it from a different perspective, a visual art standpoint. Art is considered by many as a component of audio-visual beauty, accompanied by an emotional experience. Pro wrestling is all that and much more. When you're in the ring, the storytelling confrontation is left on the two competitors, and with their skill and masterful work, they play the audience around to the storyline that the company has been building months upon. For many, pro wrestling could be all too similar and creative as theater, the only major difference being is that there's no curtain call after the show. The emotional confrontation of SummerSlam 92 match between British Bulldog and Bret Hart was for me as much emotionally involving as a film from Ingmar Bergman perhaps. The Iron Man match between Kurt Angle and Brock Lesnar was for me as intense as perhaps The French Connection. As someone who lives and breathes filmmaking, films are glittered with mass production of Hollywood trash, playing with the audience ignorance, and so does pro wrestling most of the time. But then again, there's a strange beauty behind it. Wrestling who inhabit their characters like the Ultimate Warrior really inhabit them for life. Once he has made an impact with the fans, there's no other wrestler who could be Goldberg or Razor Ramon. Like in film, being typecasted for a particular role is what pro wrestling becomes at the end. Ironically, pro wrestling for me has a lot more similarities towards ballet or theater and less towards actual sport. But this is far from being an insult. This situates pro wrestling much more towards an art form, a form of entertainment that entails plots, interesting characters, storylines, and of course, the wrestling talent on the center stage. At the end of the day, pro wrestling is all about involving the audience into the match itself. It takes an insane amount of talent to pull off a technical match, where the crowd is at the edge of their seat with every move. And as a wrestling fan, there's nothing more satisfying than watching two great wrestlers painting the canvas with the blood and sweat. And similar to tattooing, pro wrestling is in question at the moment in the world of art. It might take some time, but once the media's obsession over the cheesiness and over the top storylines is said and done, pro wrestling will surely be recognized as a legit form of visual art. Hey, if comics and graphic novels can achieve this goal within a century, so can pro wrestling. Well, Mr. UFC fan, I don't think pro wrestling can be compared to MMA, but at least it could be appreciated from an artistic standpoint, right?
Well, when you put it that way, nah, wrestling's gay, it still sucks.
Well, at least I tried. So, that was my take on pro wrestling in the world of sport and visual art. Do you agree with wrestling being a visual art form, or do you think it's just mindless entertainment? Let me know in the comment section below. And as always, like if you like this video, subscribe to the channel. And this is Gibran bringing you the films that you have to watch before you kick the bucket.